I mean, a conductor certainly represents something. That's another thing. Any orchestra needs to get their audiences, needs to get their sponsors, needs to get their recording contracts, and so on. And so they look for a conductor who they love and love working with and are artistically happy with. But let's face it, they also want the ambassador for their brand.
Conducting the Future. Our interview series starts from the question which ecological, political or social responsibilities conductors see included in their work today. In how far has a conductor's engagement changed since Herbert von Karajan's era, and how do conductors of today see the future of their profession? Can the answer to all be found in the music, or is that a naive attempt? From what point in one's career is a conductor in the position or even has the responsibility to influence our society? Conducting the Future.
Conducting the Future. Lars Vogt, you are a musician who's fully in his career, and at the same time you're a conductor fully in your career, somebody who's deeply involved in playing an instrument can't be fully involved in being a conductor at the same time. What do you say to this?
Yeah, I do see what he means. There is something that is quite... At the same time, you have to really know what it means to play an instrument, have a feel for it. I mean, nobody in the world can play all the orchestra instruments, I guess. But you have to have a feel for it, what it means. What does it mean for a trombone to start a note, and what does it mean for a string player to actually use their bow? And so a feel for the instrument is a good thing, and the piano obviously doesn't really play a part in the orchestra mostly. However, in a way, I see the core of the music making is being a conductor all the time. When I play my piano music, I am, and I'm speaking to my students about this a lot at the moment, this is in a way the orchestra, what my fingers are doing and what they're performing as to what I'm asking them to do. But there's an internal conductor at the same time who takes the decisions, who, in a way, it's like an external person inside of me that says, okay, I want this tempo, I want this character of the piece. And certainly in the sound, I'm not aiming for piano sounds, but I'm aiming for a sound of a singer, of a violinist, of a flute, of an oboe, of a bassoon. So I'm aiming for different colors, usually outside of the piano. So in a way, my orchestral work dates back to to when I even still just played the piano. And it's a question of how you look at the music. If you're really mostly interested in what concerns you, or if, as a general thing, you're interested in the whole picture. I do understand where he comes from, because in my process of being a conductor now, I see how much of it is such a different world. It's a really different thing. And the instinct needs to be different. I mean, one simple difference is that on the piano or any instrument, when you want to do an impulse, you just go bah. Yeah. Whereas as a conductor, the important thing is and then the orchestra does their bah on their own basically, but the impulse needs to be preempted.
Is this impulse something that has to be discussed with the orchestra, or is that shown automatically from your face and from your hands?
well, ideally, if you have to discuss your gestures, it's usually not a very good thing. I mean, sometimes when I'm in doubt, I actually ask sort of members of the orchestra that I trust and that I feel close to, mostly the concertmaster, of course. Is it helpful if I do this, or is it more helpful if I do that? You know, that can maybe happen, but also shouldn't happen too often. I mean, you should have a feel. I mean, the work of a conductor is basically a constant what works. You know, you do something, you get a result that you want, you're happy with it, okay, then you more or less keep the gesture. You don't get the result that you were, okay, what can I do differently? And of course you can interrupt, you can talk, which also is important, and is an important part of it. Nobody can show everything. But to have as much vocabulary in your gestures as possible is of course the aim for every conductor, so that whether you're in I don't know, Tokyo or in Los Angeles or in New York or in Buenos Aires or in Baku or wherever, you know, that people will understand you.
How difficult is it to develop your very personal own gestures so that everybody can see exactly, oh, this orchestra must have been conducted by Lars Vogt? In other words, whom do you learn from? Examples like from Karajan to Zubin Mehta today. And at what point do you have to say, okay, this is enough input, now I have to develop from myself?
Well, I find it, I mean, first of all, if you're clever when you're starting off, and I still feel, although I've been doing this quite intensely now for 10 years or so, I still feel like I'm starting off, but in a way, as a musician, you're always starting off. If you're clever, you get yourself one or two people that you speak to regularly, and that you get input from, and that you get quite open criticism from. People that you respect, and that you accept this kind of criticism from. So this is the one side. Then I love watching other conductors. I find it a fascinating thing, simply because it's such a mysterious thing. Of course, there's conducting technique, and and probably Paavo is the best example. I think he's got probably the best technique in the business. So we say he can basically do anything. However, in my experience, and I've worked as a pianist with over 200 conductors in my life, and so I've experienced a lot of different conductors, some good, some not so good, some working very well, great chemistry with orchestra, some struggling to get any kind of chemistry. So I've seen a lot of stuff, and the mysterious thing is that conducting technique alone doesn't solve anything. I mean, the old thing that the Deutsche Kapellmeister that did the whole thing of Korrepetitor and then slowly doing this and that, and is also can be a great way. But I've seen so many conductors with theoretically what is a good technique. You know, it's not beating everything. You know, and mostly I found that the pure conductors often, Paavo obviously not, I mean, he knows exactly what he's doing and when to take the step back, but mostly they beat music to death. And that's the worst thing that you can do. Deciding when does the orchestra need your help and your input and your inspiration, and when is the train running, and you don't need, when the train is running and goes, you don't have to tell the train, okay, here you turn the wheel, here. It doesn't help. When you get the train running, and then it's running, you know, and then also an orchestra, great conductors like Kleiber or Rettel or so, they know how to get something moving, or Daniel Harding, they get something moving, and then whoop, they take the step out because the engine is running, and then they can focus on the character, on the line, on whatever. Beating things to death is the worst thing that a conductor can do, and that often comes with people that think that a conducting technique solves everything already. But I'm also not saying that conducting technique is unnecessary. It's very, very necessary, of course. Some of the most inspired musicians that are loved by orchestras all over the world have very peculiar conducting techniques. So it's what's right, Sam Rattle once told me when speaking about, conducting, everything is allowed if you get the result, even if it looks ridiculous.
Looking ridiculous is really a daring thing, I want to say. But if you are daring to not care what you look like, but get the chemistry, that's really something I would admire. Of course, from the audience's side, it might be strange.
Yeah, I mean, I won't say names, but some of the great players on the conducting stage these days, in a way they look weird because they completely immerse in their emotions, and but actually people seem to also love that, and there's also the way of hardly moving at all, and also speaking very quietly in rehearsal. Even that I've seen and can have a great effect. I guess for me personally, what you just said, that this taking a risk, putting your real personality out there, taking the risk of being ridiculous. Also when speaking to an orchestra, to take the risk of using comparisons where some people might go or whatever, but if you produce an image that might help solve something, I think it's always worth it taking that risk. And the better an orchestra and the more musical the impulse in the orchestra, the more it's appreciated if you really speak music and if you really speak emotion and images.
I would like to bring Herbert von Karajan in the picture, because I can't imagine that he ever took risks like we're now talking about. He sure took risks because musically he went to the edge or beyond the edge, but in his appearance, probably never. He would never.
He didn't want to look ridiculous. Yeah, that's true. That says a certain something, if you have this kind of dignity, this kind of inner energy, this sort of expecting, even when he closed his eyes, and so every player knew he expects me to do exactly this. So, I mean, music is a lot about this inner force anyway. If you learn anything as a conductor, when you start off, you do all your big gestures. And if anything, what you learn is everything can be less and less and less and less and less, and you get much bigger results. And a great orchestra, even if you show something with hardly a gesture that's quite small, you can get quite big sounds. So it is about this inner connection, and I admire what Karajan does with his hands, how he shapes things in mid-air. I was speaking before about the conductors that beat things to death. He certainly never did that. I mean, you never see him do this. It's always a very round movement. And we have these prejudices sometimes these days that his tempos were slower, so it's completely not true. I mean, when you listen to the Brahms symphonies, for example, his slow movements, the andantes and so on, are much more fluent than most conductors do these days. And I actually, especially these second movements of Brahms symphonies, I feel quite close to, and closer to than with a lot of the contemporary conductors. My problem is a little bit this style question, that that the sound of Mozart is so similar to the sound of Brahms and to the sound of Stravinsky and whatever, and there I really find that one has to speak completely different languages, like those composers spoke very different languages.
We're very strong on the musical side. Let's open the picture that is a conductor is giving today, because there is so much more in the business than only creating the concerts. There's your personal attitudes, if or if not, to show them to the world. Every extracurricular activities you're doing, be it for the music or be it for nature, for politics, for human rights, whatever. And how far is that important for the figure of the conductor? Because a conductor is automatically a leader. So is this leading thing something that has to be founded in society as well?
Well, a conductor gets a lot of attention, and whether rightly or not, because in terms of politics or our development as a society, often maybe some of the members of the orchestra would have maybe more clever things to say than the conductors. Why would they necessarily have the big view over things? It's a bit like in society, these days a conductor certainly represents something. That's another thing. Any orchestra needs to get their audiences, needs to get their sponsors, needs to get their recording contract, and so on. And so a conductor, they look for a conductor who they love and love working with and are artistically happy with. But let's face it, they also want the ambassador for their brand. So that's another thing that an orchestra is looking for. And as such an ambassador, it's not so helpful if the conductor runs around saying stupid things all the time. So apart from anything, any artist these days, I think, we're not living in a different world. We live in this world. And so it's clear that we think about this world and possibly and are simply as a member of society, maybe a quite exposed member of society, we share our thoughts and our values and our worries, our concerns and our hopes. And in a Beethovenian sense, maybe we try to also make the world a little bit better with music, and give people the energy to overcome our fears and our hate and our all these things, and find to a better society in some ways. That's the ideal world, I'm not saying we all managed that.
Karajan founded the Karajan Academy, which we still know today. You founded Rhapsody in School. That was long ago, when you were only working as a pianist. Mm-hmm. How important is it to sow seeds into something that can grow by itself, but still has your name on?
Well, for me, the name is not so important. That's why it's also not called Lars Vogt Rhapsody, but it's called Rhapsody in School. So, the project has also come to his own way now. So it's going very well, and it's being well run, and I'm still happy to be a part of it. And I'm happy to have put the first thoughts into it and to have gotten it on the way. which took a lot of work, also partly. But it was great, and it's a fantastic project to go into the schools and talk about music and the passion for music. I still love doing that whenever I can. And the Karajan Academy is a brilliant thing. I mean, it's so many great musicians in orchestras everywhere have gone through the Karajan Academy. A lot of the players in the Berlin Philharmonic have gone through this academy, and it's set an example worldwide. I mean, there are academies like that in a lot of places now, where people have understood, okay, we want to attract good young players at a very early stage, give them the chance to play in our orchestra, and if they're doing really well, why not take them over? Why not employ them? And so it's a fantastic way to get a feel for the life in an orchestra, also for the young musicians to see what is it like, what do I like about it, what maybe don't I like about it, and maybe some will decide not to go into an orchestra after after the experience, but some may decide, yes, I want to be in an orchestra like that, so this is a wonderful, really wonderful institution, I think.
We are now, of course, in the middle of a pandemic, but we are now at a turning point, I would say, worldwide, because now we can have a new look on ecology as well. How much do we have to travel? We can have a new look on how necessary is the life experience of concerts, because a lot can be done on the internet as well. So all of this, I see exactly what you are going to answer. So, there are a lot of loose screws, I would say, we can fix anew and then bring the word into a new balance. So where would you like to start off on that?
And certainly I've had a lot of conversations with colleagues when we were all sitting at home, just practicing for ourselves, growing beards. And one common theme was a little bit, what on earth were we doing these last 20 years? Just zooming from place to place, feeling this need to be everywhere at the same time. Is this really what music is about? Is this really what our life is all about? I mean, we love performing. We love being out there for people, and there's nothing like the performance for people. Even now in these times, I've been lucky enough to, in Spain there were still concerts happening, so I did a play conduct concert in Bilbao with this symphonic orchestra, with the Mozart Piano Concerto and the Beethoven Pastoral Symphony. And even though we had to do the concert in mask, apart from the wind players, obviously, but for me that was really sort of a thing where I thought, oh God, can I even do that? Can I perform a concert in mask? But in the end, it was still all worth it. There's nothing like it. People coming together in one moment in time, which it's this moment and then it's gone. And even though the hall was, of course, only filled with 400 people or something like that, still those people were there. They lived with us through this moment. You appreciate this even more after all this experience of lockdown and no concerts happening. I also tried to do twice sort of such a streaming concert from my living room, and then I understood that it's really not what I'm made for, and I think also not what music is meant to be. I mean, I understand that people need to want to stay active and want to still play and want to have some kind of feeling of a performance, but it just cannot be replaced by such a streaming thing. I mean, even in normal times, I enjoy it when there's the additional possibility of streaming. I love the digital concert hall of the Berlin Philharmonic, where I can just look into some concerts, or now the DSO player, where I can see my friend Robin Ticciati in wonderful concerts, even when I'm not there. I love that, and it's a great additional thing. But the core concept of being in one place at one time, going through a journey together, suffering through pain and joy and everything that all the music has to offer, drama, and then going home having experienced something together, it just cannot